welcome everyone to Enrich Your Coffee. It's our third session today. So, Nikolai, you are center chef at DTI, the Danish Technological Institute, and today you will tell us how we as research infrastructure should be organized internally toward an innovative or innovation mentality, actually. So, what do we have to do? Tell us.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think you should be telling how you should be organized, or at least share ideas about how it's done. So I think this topic came about after we had our Enreach network meeting. I think we had some very good discussions at the table I was in charge of. And actually, I wanted to just sort of lay out a couple of the things that we touched upon there in the discussion, and also hear about how different people think about that. As many of you know, we're also doing these, have done the big survey, and we're analyzing the results. And there were a few things that popped up that was a little bit surprising to me, and it would be good to discuss it with you guys. So that's the topic we set for the day. And let me just share a presentation. Okay, let's share the screen. So does it work in presentation mode here?
We see it.
Great. Yeah, so I mean, first, this is a coffee break, so we should start with something nice. And I was just looking at some of the old presentations, and really, I mean, I would have loved to gone to Grenada and cook the paella. And still, even though, okay, so why is this one just flipping through the slides? Let's see, it must be something automatic here. Okay, it shouldn't. Okay, sorry, if the slides are make a change, then apparently there's something wrong here. But we really enjoyed cooking the paella and thinking about Granada, and also having some nice discussions. And as I said in this table 3, one of the questions that we dug into was we were discussing how can we sort of unlock the innovation potential of RIs. And one of the questions zoomed in on this ILO or ICO position, and which kind of skills would you be looking for in this position? And probably many of you are, in fact, either ILO or ICO. I think the first result, so this was a Mentimeter just on the table that we did. So I think the first thing that I wanted to discuss with you was what's your take on these things? So if I read down the list, actually, diplomatic negotiation skills is required. You have to be at home with the scientific and technical topics and terms. At the same time, they have to know about SMEs and how they check. Then there's actually one, the red one is on the communication skills, which is also really a necessity. EU research, innovation, landscape and trends, and apparently not so important. But one thing that is the most important is that they have to have a network of contacts and some online identity, so that they can use this to reach out to industry. Then we also asked, does this person need to know how to sell? And if you look at the yellow sort of dots in the background, you'll see there's quite a spread from some of the participants thought that was not important at all. Or I guess that's just one answer that thought it very highly, and then a couple in the middle. So when I show you this kind of thing, I want to open the floor for people to comment, either in general terms or just sort of anecdotes from your own experience. Which traits are important when you have to have a industry contact person?
If I may, John?
Go ahead, John.
I think, first of all, we need to distinguish. Here we're saying RIs, but there's different types of RIs. And the role of the officer or a person who's responsible for industry liaison is going to change very much according to what type of RI he or she is in. In a single-sided big science RI, you have industry as a natural client. and so the dynamics are pretty much what you just described here. In a distributed RI, more like an Esprit, non-technical RI, more like in domains like environment or social sciences or humanities, the challenges are much more internal. And so the competencies of that person are much more focused on building a mentality inside and a structure inside.
Interesting. It's basically saying that maybe we should have had sort of change management or management skills actually on the table as well. So that's probably more important when you're discussing with the scientist internally.
The structure of a distributed Esprit RI is not conducive to innovation type activities at the moment. I'm generalizing, but I can safely generalize. And so that requires a activities which are very different from those that an ILO might be carrying out at this stage, at the earlier stage. There will come a point when you get more evolved that the two will resemble each other, but that will take a while and will take a lot of effort.
Yeah. It's interesting because the traits that we collected on this this slide are all sort of directed, mainly directed outwards towards the client. But what you're saying also is that we shouldn't overlook the skills needed to go internally into the organization.
Yes.
Do we have other thoughts on that? Other ICOs who have this, who see their role as both outgoing to companies, but also going inside, discussing with the scientists, allocating beam time, for example, and these things.
If I can elaborate just a little bit further, it's important to understand that distributed RIs have a problem of fragmentation. They're dealing with a situation where you have a central management headquarters, and then you have facilities distributed geographically, often widely dispersed. And it's a common phenomenon that you have a lot of activity, including with industry, going on in the different facilities, but they're not aggregated and they don't assume a unitary identity. And so that's looks more like a network than a research infrastructure. And that's the real challenge of the person whose job it is to create an innovation mentality, is to try to correct that. That's very complex for many reasons, which I can describe, but I don't want to overtake this whole session.
No, let's hear from someone else. Anyone feel up for it, or should I call someone?
I think you have to call the people, because otherwise
I feel tempted to challenge Mark Thierry from AZG in Hamburg, because I know you work in the space between industrial usage, but and you are at a big science facility, so I don't think the situation is as simple as John puts it. I think you do actually interact a lot with the scientific side and different beamlines. Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, sure. Yes, I have to, because yeah, I'm more or less the only person on this interface between the industrial customers and the scientists with the beamlines. So yes, I'm trying to acquire new customers or keep in touch with the existing ones, and then yeah, the first step of planning the experiments with the scientists, I'm also involved. Sometimes even in the measurements at certain methods. But mainly it is because we only have 3 instruments at DESY and 3 instruments in Garching. So so we would need much more customers to justify hiring, say, let's hiring 2 people, one for the outreach and one for the internal procedures. At DAISY, it's a little bit different. They have a larger team now in the ITT department. Is someone here by them? No, I can't see anyone. So they have several people. So Sabine, for example, she's more on the road, let's say, while Oliver is managing all the internal things. But that's much more instruments, so it just makes sense, of course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. Please go ahead.
Can I add a comment, a general comment? I'm Dr. Vitale from the Italian National Research Council. I'm involved in the SciOS infrastructure. For a while, I was interested to this issue of the transfer to the industry. But of course, from the side of environmental science and infrastructure, then it's very challenging from this point of view. So I don't know if it's considered, and we have different several planes on which to, when you are looking about the internal organization, you need to take into account the large spread of condition and situation. You can have infrastructure that are very much connected for the topics to the industry, other less. You have a big central infrastructure, distributed infrastructure. All these elements are very impacting on the of the topics as how we should be organized to be better and more efficient in the connection with the industry and the stakeholders. So is this taken into account, or we are just trying to define our general broad and scheme? So this is my question.
Yeah, I can give a short answer myself, but I also want to open the floor to anyone else. I mean, one of the challenges, at least we've seen in Enrich, is that, you know, no one size fits all. So we can bring about these topics and we can discuss them and see in some cases that would work. And obviously, as you say, if you have an area where you're already in close contact with industry, maybe you need one kind of person or one kind of organization, actually. In other areas, you need someone who's probably more capable of discussing with the scientists and seeing how can that fit into industry. Then it's another kind of organization, which is basically the same as John also pointed out, that having these large single-sided facility is also different from having distributed and knowing what's going on. So, I mean, there's not going to be one answer that fits all. But I do think it's important to see what traits are then needed from both the persons involved in this and also from the organization.
Well, if you can make a common trait that sort of bypasses the whole difference in setup and type of RI, perhaps the biggest challenge that we all have, and which we tend to not know how to address too well, is to understand better what the industry needs rather than approach it from the scientific point of view. And that takes a sensibility and being able to overcome a difference in approach, a sort of culture gap that exists between industry and science.
Another point about the connection, which are the agenda, because we can be only as a seller of services to industry. Of course, we have a scope, then also move to some, not the origin of research infrastructure, not only to be a service for industry, are much bigger, much broader. And also we come from some needs from the public side, from the scientific community. And of course, we have a need to move to the private sector, but without to forget, then we have an origin and a main topic. So synchronize agenda and try to find the overlapping areas. This is important, but not become just a service. What you like, and okay, this is what we can do for your needs. So this is the challenge: how to maintain our identity and primary scope giving more to the private sector. And this is the no easy issue and question to solve.
So it's a sort of team approach with industry, a cooperative approach towards fulfilling some big challenges that can be economic and social and scientific put together.
Good. I wanna just start off what Vitaly was saying, because you sort of moved me right into the next point, which I'd call this is about priorities. So you say the agenda. I mean, it's you need to do your public organization, the RIs, you need to do public research. Not just a service to industry, and having an ICO, a dedicated person to work with industry, that's also prioritization. So one of the things we asked about in the Enrich service, which is on my slide now, is whether actually the RI prioritizing employing an ICO. And there actually the picture was very mixed. 30% have, or 29% have a full-time ICO. Further 18% have some part-time staff that has this as their task. And then there's a large fraction saying no, and even some other constructions. So that's one interesting point, that I mean, less than half of the RIs actually employ an ICO or have this function. Another question that I plucked from this survey is whether or not the RI has prioritized having an advisory committee with industry involvement. And there, the middle category says yes. About 20% of the RIs actually have an industry advisory committee. Further, 16% has it in some way as a form of their other advisory functions. And then the large majority says no. So I present you with these facts, and then I think it's a good opportunity to discuss these priorities that Vitaly talked about. Is it the role, and should it be more prioritized, or is it fine as it is?
But you see, Nicholas, again, if you were to segment this, you probably would find, I can bet on it, that the ones who don't have an ICO are the research infrastructures which have more of a distributed situation, and which are very concerned with implementing and getting operational and setting up their services and everything, which is a big challenge for distributed research infrastructures. And industry tends to be very low down in the priorities. And so that naturally includes having a staff that deals with it.
Could I raise the question for the ICOs who are in this group here now? Are you full-time or are you part-time? So maybe that would bring us already closer to this, who answered what. So if I go scroll down to my list here, so I guess, Nigel, you are an ICO, you can call yourself an ICO. Are you full-time or are you part-time?
Oh, I'm very part-time.
You're very part-time, okay.
Yeah, I'm very part-time, but I'm not the only person involved in contacts with industry, and I think that is a complication, that we have business developers who have their own networks. But I think that's very much a feature of distributed RIs in, let's say, the non-big science areas. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but
but sorry, and then because I'm just going through my list now, Claudia, you are at a health and food organization as well, right? Aren't you?
Yes, at Eurobioimaging.
And are you full or part-time or no time?
I work full-time, actually.
Good, very good.
But I think it has emerged already in previous discussions that for our infrastructure, the relation to industry is maybe slightly different. That we have much more focus on academic exchange on technical developments and then joint projects and training activities than really some of the stuff that other RIs are dealing with.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't want to take over this session, but I see
No, okay.
Krista here, and I think I haven't met you yet, but I mean, where are you from? I think you were from a social science, and weren't you?
Yes, so I'm from Clarin in Finland. And actually, yesterday we got funding for a big project on collecting speech. So we've been doing that together with the National Broadcasting Company for half a year, and we have something like 3,000 hours of speech already collected from all of Finland. And this campaign will be ongoing. And we now got infrastructure funding to develop this into speech modules together with industry. So that's why I was interested in your aspects of the whole thing. Is there something I should know in addition to what I've already been doing?
Nikolai will tell you.
First of all, congratulations. It's always good. No, I mean, I would be tempted to ask you then about how you involve industry. I mean, do you have then a committee or steering group of this project where you engage industry in some way?
Well, we have been, we did a report actually 1.5 years ago in order to start the speech collection campaign together with the National Broadcasting Company and also a state government organization that was involved in collecting this. And there we did interviews with industry in order to see what their basic needs are so that we could, because we knew from research in speech recognition and speech synthesis that there is a need for that in Finland, because you have all the large companies having good speech recognition for English and various other big languages, but for Finnish it may be more brittle, so it doesn't perform as well. And then that was, so we knew that that was needed, but then of course a number of companies are small and medium-sized companies that could use this data set. And there are only a few that can actually develop these speech modules, but the larger uptake of all this effort will be in companies applying these ready-made modules. And then you come into other types of processing of speech, so that when you convert it to text, then it doesn't really look like regular text. So you would have to adapt the text-based tools in order to be able to process transcribed speech. And all of this will be part of what we are doing together with industry. So we've also applied for funding together with Business Finland, which is an organization providing development money for industry as well. So we got funding for the academic part, and then now when we already are, I feel that it's more like when you start getting something and you get the whole big thing rolling, then now also other types of foundations are becoming interested, because there are research foundations that would like to provide their researchers access to this data that we are collecting. I mean, a number of people have been telling about their experiences with Corona or the COVID virus, because we've had lockdown and people have been sitting, talking to the application and giving us speech data on COVID. And this is something that social science and humanities foundations usually provide to their researchers. They're interested in the content, whereas industry is interested just in the speech signal in order to make speech components. So this will go in two different directions, and catering to industry, we will have to do some things, but in order to make researchers happy, we will probably need to have a slightly different aspect. But the whole thing starts from the fact that we have a very large body of data that we can provide to various parties.
Okay, so I guess, Krista, you're actually representing a node from Clarion, so you're part
Yes.
of these distributed facilities. Then it would be interesting to hear your take on the ICO. If you yourself have anyone charged with the responsibility of going out and interacting with industry, or if it's more part of what everybody does, or how is that structured in the nodes?
So I guess ICO means Industry Communication Officer, or
contact in this context,
okay.
but similar, yes.
Okay, yeah. So for this starting up this project, I had one person that is part of my permanent staff doing much of the pre-study, and also I've let him be in charge of most of the contacts, simply to make things smoother, because he already then got in touch with all these, and I assume that he will also continue being in touch with them. But now that we got this larger funding, I will also step up and do more of the communication myself.
Did I understand correctly that so you're not just supplying data, you're also getting involved in the development of the applications?
Yes, although I see that our way of doing this, it's limited. We only have a limited amount of staff, and it will take a huge effort. So that's why we really need all these partners to cooperate. And even if we are able to provide some initial modules, we will need industry to be able to develop applications and also maintain the applications and modules that have been initially developed. Otherwise, they will be outdated rather quickly. So that's why I see it as essential to involve industry and make sure that this data becomes part of the ecosystem that they form.
I guess you're answering one of our basic questions. That so the really great thing about what you just described is that you have a specific area that you're developing with industry, which is well defined, and that provides you the basis for establishing a continuous dialogue and development. And that's difficult to replicate in many other situations. That is something which we should all try to do.
Yeah, so I guess we are lucky in the sense that what I have always been thinking, and I got advice 10 years ago when I started leading Clarion in Finland, is that we should focus on big data sets that are too big for individual research groups to collect and distribute. And this is an instance of that. So we have large data sets from historical newspapers, 200 years of newspapers, but they are already collected and distributed by the National Library, but we can do something more for them. And we have large data sets for social media that we've collected and distributed, but these are also easily accessible. But this specific speech data set was not so easy for industry themselves to get hold of. So there we naturally had a role in getting this going. And now that we have the data set, we immediately become interesting to all these actors that want to do something with the data.
Okay. Great, thank you. I think our time is up. I'm going to stay online for the next half hour if someone wants to discuss further.
If I understand, if I can say, the key question is reset infrastructure, how to make a reset infrastructure put more attention to this connection and resources, of course. And as any other business, the target is to give them a reason for that. So in which way we can facilitate the industry to look the market, the landscape, to understand the potentiality. So we should try to develop a scheme for which ICOS, this person, should operate, and or to provide to the research infrastructure just reason to invest more. So with some good example and also scheme module through which they should operate for that. So this is because it's clear then if you are here discussing is because we consider this very important to increase this. So no doubt about our vision on this point. But how to operate means then you need to convince research infrastructure that is important. So this means then research infrastructure need to carefully look to the scope and mandate and targets overall. And if they identify, then for them is important the stakeholder to work in with some modality in approaching. And the main will be to look to the landscape and the opportunity, and then for them can come. I don't see other way. So we can just say, okay, you need to have an advisory committee, you need to have a person working. Okay, these are money. And for which reason they need to spend and do this. And this should be the scope of, main scope of this coordination action, to my opinion.
Yeah, very. I think those are actually good final words. Ute, do you want to take over?
Some promotion for next week. So next week, because next week I would like to test the water with you, because I am currently, let's say, designing a kind of conference. No, it's not a kind of conference, it's a conference, an online conference, and it's called RI Logistics. And that is because we at ESS, we're currently building the facility, and that means lots of, let's say, goods and in-kind contributions will be shipped to Lund. And we are, let's say, feeling the need that there is no platform anywhere in Europe where our procurement people, not our procurement, but our logistics people could get advice. And so this is something where we're now teaming up mainly with the big science facility when it comes to the supply side of things. And I could imagine that this is a very relevant topic for ILO, since, I mean, logistics companies should be in your, let's say, database as well. But that's only one aspect of logistics. The other aspect of logistics is the user-related logistics. What we have learned in this year is that remote access provision has become more and more common, obviously, since we couldn't travel anymore. And now we want to also explore this aspect, and that could be very interesting for the ICOs, is how and what kind of logistics related, let's say, challenges do we face in providing remote access. And that's a conference that should address those both aspects. And we're going to scope it out early next year. And I would like to collect your input already next week in what are the topics that you think should be addressed in such a let's say, layered conference. That's my sales pitch for next Tuesday at 11 o'clock.
Great.
Excellent.
Well, the registration will be put up right after the session, and make sure to check our Twitter and our LinkedIn page. That's where we will promote it. We'll also send out a newsletter next week before the session to remind everyone to join. I put in the chat, we also have our closed LinkedIn group. So if you guys want to continue this conversation there, if you do have to leave, you can go over there and start a conversation. But we're also available to sit here for another 20 minutes if you would like to continue the discussion with us. Feel free.
Great. Thank you. So I mean, that's the official session over, and people will start leaving. But as I said, we can continue. And thanks to Vitaly. Yes, you are still here. Vito Charlie. Sorry, I got that wrong. Because I mean, the things you point to, I think, are good guidelines also for the work we will be doing in the Enrich project right now, to see
Okay.
What are the benefits, what are the best practices, how should you do industry events, So it'll become much more operational at this stage. And certainly I agree that, I mean, we asked them questions about, do you have an ICO employed, or do you have these things? And now is the phase where we'll go in and discuss, I mean, why don't you have a advisory board? So that goes more into the how should I say, the justification of the cost. Have you seen it have an effect or not?
Okay, my experience come from the environmental science, and I work in the polar regions. I say I'm involved in SIOS, so technology there for observation is very important. But it's what is very difficult is to adjust the agenda then come from industry. The need of industry is to produce products that they can sell. And also environmental science deal with a little industry, normally are very little in dimension, very with a lot of needs and very difficult to sell the equipments around, and no work with big numbers, mainly with no, if you are talking with instruments, etc., etc. So is so also they have the problem to realize rapidly a business. So it's very difficult to synchronize agenda. So when you approach them, try to propose something, or also to understand in which way you can help them. It's not easy to find a common plane on which to work together, because they look to something that can be realized commercially in 1-2 years very rapidly, and it's not often this is possible. And at the same time, you have a lot of also effort about services made by many organizations, also at the public level. No, I talk. You can see that there's also the European level. You have a lot of organizations that are service organizations. Then through the networking and to the coordination, they work on this plane, and they are. You can become also rapidly in conflict with the industry point of view. So you can be much more a competitor than an helper. So there is also a difficulty for industry to dialogue with you, because of course they don't like to share with you the knowledge sometimes. Then they are acquired because they are worried then this can become. So these are a lot of problems, at least for environmental science. Even if you look, and instruments developed to create a business planning with industry, the procurement, the PPI is simply make no sense. This system is for big infrastructure hospitals. They need to develop new equipment. They need to buy 100 equipment. Okay, fantastic. They can work with an industry, because the investment they need to do is the public contribution to this system. But look to a network that need to make observation. We can talk about 20 instruments much cheaper. How to find an industry that is able to work with you just for this little amount of money? So this is the problem. So the instruments developed are good for some services, some public organization, but in environmental science is very, very, very weak. Argo, an example, Argo floats, okay, is if you look, is a successful story, a lot of measurements on the ocean, etc., 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 but at the industrial level is a nightmare. There remain only a couple of industries in the world that are continue to deal with this market. And this is one of the biggest example of instrumentation for environmental. And of course, we have the problem of the satellites. No, the problem. Satellites have become much bigger, are much more effective to observe and analyze and survey, monitor the Earth. And this is, of course, another aspect. So a lot of difficulties then come from the dimensional industry, the difficulty to synchronize and find overlapping points. So for is always from this point of view, respect to biology or no, or other.
However, an area where some of these problems are less, and where for instance, a research infrastructure like EMSO, which is about marine, is very active and it has a lot of potential, is in the testing side. And so for small and medium-sized companies to come into the infrastructure to test their instruments in special situations, which we can offer because we're very geographically differentiated.
Yeah, but
and also we to include in that services to assure compliance with standards and with quality, and this is where you can build a relationship with a host of SMEs, and we do this.
But John, industry is not interested to the quality. In reality, no. Okay, understand me. No. They are of course interested to the quality, to the level, but in a right ratio with a speed to produce an instrument and to sell an instrument. So they can spend 5 years to test an instrument to find the best instruments. They like to produce something and sell something that is reasonable, good, reasonable, providing reasonable good data. But okay, so it's always a contrast from the money.
What we try to do, Vito, is that we try to be a very high standard organization that has a mark of excellence. And that way we give to whoever comes to test and passes the tests on our system a mark of approval that gives them an advantage when they export or when they develop.
But how many new instruments you think the industry can have?
We're very active in certain areas. This is not across the infrastructure. We tend to focus in special situations, in particular facilities, particular nodes that have specialization in wind energy or ocean energy, or special robotics, special situations. But that's very much something that the infrastructure advertises as its raison d'être, and which tries to develop on a bigger scale. So, and this bypasses some of the problems you just mentioned. I mean, sure, the level is much more less ambitious, and we're starting for small steps. But this is really the mission of an infrastructure in Europe, to try to stimulate SMEs to be more advanced in the technologies they offer, and to be a leader in this area, and to give them situations where they have a easier time producing this stuff.
Yeah, but then you feel in another question, because you are a research infrastructure. So how far you need to move from the research issue? So we are in every plus, you remember, in every community, the debate is always the contact with industry is to ameliorate our capability, our research capability, or is we need to focus more on the service for industry, whatever is the role. Because you told about wind energy, not the energy, and said that your site can become a test for example, I can think in polar areas for materials, for example, not to test materials, resistance, etc., and that can be very important for many. So the shipping industry can be interested to have a place where you can test materials for a long time, or solutions. But how much you need to move far away from the research area to move to follow the market, to follow the industry that can be interested to you? This is a question.
A research infrastructure is not a research organization. It's an infrastructure that facilitates
but need to facilitate first of all the research.
But you facilitate the encounter of research with industry. So this is a dynamic situation.
But
that you need to calibrate according to whatever you're trying to do. But you're not there to do research. That's not your primary
No,
service.
but you are there to produce, to facilitate research to work better. This is the first target.
And also industry to work better.
Yes, but you approach industry to give a better solution to the research, or just to help industry to find better solution? This is the question.
Well, at this stage where we are at, the challenge is more to find applications for research and for processes and procedures that exist in an infrastructure that are just sitting there and that have no application, and to try to channel them towards something which is more productive and which can benefit as industry. I think that's where we start.
Listening to this discussion, for me, this illustrates the need for a well-structured dialogue between research infrastructure and industry. So,
yes.
Of course, this dialogue should be organized better, perhaps. And it's not, I think, restricted to one person, one ICO at a research infrastructure. Perhaps you need many of officers with different qualities that are engaged with this relation. So perhaps you need a central office and many ICOs that holds, of course, both for single-sided facilities as distributed facilities. But at least listening at this discussion, it's for me clear and illustrates that there is a need for this, for a better structured dialogue.
In fact, sorry, to take that a little further, in Embry Plus, we proposed just this idea about what is called a hub and spoke situation, where you have a central nucleus in the research infrastructure. I'm talking mainly here about distributed, and then you have a person or two persons in the various facilities. And this creates a structure where you have continuity in the knowledge and in the competencies, and a concentration in the center, where you establish the strategies and the methodologies and things, right. But then you carry that out outside. But I would take that even further, actually, based on my experience, although it's not a very popular idea. But there's a role, in my opinion, for ESFRI, or something like ESFRI, that aggregates all the infrastructures and creates an innovation hub that is common to all of them, and because there's some common themes that go beyond the disciplines when you talk about industry, as there are in communications, and these are two areas where I think for the roadmap that has to do with research infrastructures could benefit a lot by having something that pools across all the infrastructures, or a number of them, say. Where we can become more visible, and where some of the things that we are supposed to accomplish become more on the radar screen of the general public and industry as a whole. But this is
and I also think we have to keep in mind that innovation is, let's say, a combination of communications, yeah, procurement, co-development, outreach, so somewhere
and logistics and technical
together. Yes,
yeah,
absolutely. But yeah, I agree with what John was saying, and I can add then even at the coordination level, at least for polar research, the coordination ongoing, EuPolarNet, etc., are strongly looking to the interaction with the stakeholders. I believe then we should, we talk about innovation, about industry, but maybe we can move to social benefit and to stakeholder can be a much better language, because we need to enlarge, because innovation can mean many and can not only look to the technology, but can become also a way to combine knowledge to produce better products in general, products in commerce. Not just physical object. Yeah. Okay. So this is in the environment, the social benefit, and the main point is to think, identify the agenda side and from the stakeholder side, and try to find commonalities and overlapping. And sometimes this can happen in very strange direction. So I agree with John. Then it's not only this. If you look this along only the plane of a single research infrastructure, sometimes you lose a lot of opportunities just because you are not able to see them. So it's and the same can happen from the both side. The same also for industry. We normally we don't image. We need to image them from the industry side. The science sector is a very nightmare. They know very few about, and they are very not able to move inside our landscape.
In fact, I really think that communications is really the biggest area where we start, because for instance, talking about my shop, EMSO, we have a problem in that everything is fragmented. There's a lot of great stuff going on in the facilities, but it doesn't have visibility. And it certainly doesn't have visibility as EMSO. It might have visibility as the IFREMER or INGV or the Greek Hellenic Research Organization, but it doesn't take on this brand, the brand of EMSO, and so that's the real. If we start just by taking the low-hanging fruit, you know, what the activity is at the moment that already exists out there, and packaging it so that it's visible and so that it has a common thread, and that's just at the level of EMSO. We could get a lot of mileage out of that because we don't do that. And so take that further and go outside just one research infrastructure and start talking about a cluster of research infrastructures. Think of what you can communicate in terms of the value of these organizations.
Yes.
But we're so far away from that. It's very depressing.
But I have another point. We are talking. Oh, sorry, maybe. We are talking about.
I'm sorry, I have to go.
About our coordination, but in which way we approach the organization of industry. So I believe then the same we are talking for us, not to be more organized, more a bigger vision. The same is for industry. So we have a lot of industry organization. So the entry point for industry can be this organization, because they then are able to talk with the members with a much more common language, and also they have a reputation to talk with the members much more. So organization, the dialogue should be identified mainly with the organization of industry. For example, look at the ocean, world ocean. Yeah, so it's important to identify who are the good counterpart. And this is the one element. But so instead to approach the single industry, because it's always we need to reinforce the communication with the organization of industry, because they
the sector association. But also really, and this is so key. I mean, my whole career I've been a trade officer, a commercial officer, and I know from experience the patience and concentration capability of industry is very short compared to science. You have to be able to, the skill you have to have as an ICO or an ILO is to be able to present the benefit to industry in a very compressed and convincing and time efficient way without getting too scientific jargon and all this stuff. And that's not an easy skill to acquire. You have to have a real background and the sensibility to do that. So if you're talking about what an ICO, what competencies an ICO has to have, it has to be, he or she has to be able to bridge that gap that exists between the scientific mentality, especially old-time scientific mentality, and industry that is only interested in speed and profit.
But the organization can reduce a little bit of this weakness, this problem.
The sector association can help you attract industry to hear your message, and to sort of get more access to industry.
It's almost it's really a shame to have to interrupt the discussion.
Yeah, okay. Sorry.
If you look in the chat, there's actually there's a LinkedIn group that you can go to and continue the discussion. How does that work, Madison? I haven't tried that before.
So if you have LinkedIn, you can just click the link and join the group. You have to request to join the group, so it's closed for the Enrich community. But then you can just go and create a post. We can continue these conversations that we're having in the chat, and as well as here, you can just type your comment and send it, and everyone can comment on it there. So because I think we have 2 minutes left, so it's good if we can all move over to there, and while you're working, you can comment and join in on the
very good discussion. Thank you very much.
But certainly, Nicholas, your focus groups and WP3 and what we're doing in Enrich is the home for the evolution of these discussions, and what they really will produce, right?
I agree.
And hopefully, we will produce something that will be useful.
Exactly. Great.
Okay.
Great.
Okay. Talk to you later. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye, folks. Bye.